Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 Open Championship Data Dive Show. Per usual on a Monday night, we're going to take our first look at the forecast for the Portrush area, see how the weather is going to impact the 153rd Open Championship. We're going to take a deep statistical dive into past Open Championships. We'll take a look at 2019, although I have voiced my concerns regarding the statistics around that last night pretty heavily. But we're going to take a deep statistical dive into how past Open Championships have played, figure out the players who are excelling at the statistics and metrics that generally play well at an Open Championship. And at the end of the show, I will show you the research that I would have posted earlier today. Fantasy National was a little late in terms of updating their database for the Scottish Open, but I will still show the research that I would have posted, and I will post that either later tonight or tomorrow. So we have a lot to get into. Let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where, as I just alluded to, normally I post research regarding the tournament of the week, course information, past winners, patterns that they all share. Wasn't able to do that today with the delay from Fantasy National, but that'll be out either later this evening or tomorrow. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contest I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see the wagers that I've made, which I've made a couple already for the Open Championship, you want to see the players I'm using most often, give me a follow over at X. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle's in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. Can't recommend it enough. Make sure you're following him over on social media, because that is where we place our detailed write-ups for our 2025 Picks Challenge. Last I knew, I had a 1-point lead. Don't know how that changed with the Scottish Open, but I have a 1-point lead. But if you want to see our detailed write-ups for our weekly picks, give Gabe a follow, and then make sure you're subscribed to that article, because every Wednesday you're going to be able to get his deluxe version, which has his best values, top plays, projected ownerships, and all of that. Can't recommend it enough. And then lastly, for this intro, we are live. Chat's open. I want to hear from you all. Anything to do with Open Championship in regards to weather, how you think the course is going to play, strong feelings on any individual players. Feel free to put any thoughts and comments in to the chat. I will be more than happy to get to those and answer any questions. And if you're not able to catch the show live, make sure you put your thoughts and opinions into the comments. I'll always get to those as well. So let's get into it. Let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2025 Open Championship. And as I alluded to, we always start a Monday night with the extended forecast over at Windfinder. Now, I will say today, it is Monday night local for me. Oh my goodness, that camera is so not centered. So apologies with that. Hey Stewie, how you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for jumping in chat. You still love Sepp. You and I are going to be a little bit different this week then, at least in that regard. I mean, the statistics will probably love him, and he does have a top 5 from the Open, I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago. But for me, I just can't overlook that 0 for 3 in the majors this year. And at the end of the show, I'll show you my research that kind of backs up what I'm talking about there with some major performance this season in regards to the Open Championship. But again, very much appreciated that you jumped into chat. Hopefully you've had a good day and your research is going well as we count down to the last major of 2025. I'm going to say today, although right now for me locally it's Monday night, but Over in Scotland, it's early Tuesday morning. It looks like they're going to get a little bit of rain today, but not what I would guess is not a whole lot. In fact, if we go to like the super forecast, it looks like it's mostly in the morning. But with the amount of wind they're also supposed to get, I imagine it's going to be pretty negligible in terms of making the course soggy or wet or anything like that. Normally, these places can handle quite a bit of rain. Going off last week's performance, yeah, he was pretty good at the Scottish. I'll give him that. We've seen that from Sepp before though this year. So let me get through the forecast, Stewie, and then we'll get into some individual players and whatnot. But I mean, if you're big into the recent form, then sure, I can't argue against that. But yeah, by the time the tournament rolls around on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, it does look like we are going to be dealing with some amount of rain in the forecast throughout the tournament, but not a whole lot of wind, seemingly. Not a whole lot of wind for Northern Ireland, what I would guess this time of year. So we'll take a look at some wind metrics in Fantasy National, but this is a far cry from what we had in 2019 when Shane Lowry won. So I'm still of the belief that this isn't going to be as difficult as 2019. With that said, this is Northern Ireland, England, Scotland. At this time of year, storms can just kind of pop up. Much like where I live, in the United States, storms just kind of pop up. It is summer. So we'll have to keep our eye on this. And of course, I'll update our forecast or the forecast at the beginning of the show Wednesday night. But as of right now, I don't see too much of a wave advantage, depending on what the super forecast looks like for Thursday there in Portrush. It does look like we're going to be dealing with a little bit of rain, the most rain seemingly on Saturday. But I don't think it's going to be so influential that we're going to have to adjust how we're thinking about the Open Championship. Hey, good evening, Darnell. Thanks for jumping in chat. Very much appreciated. Good to see you this evening. Hopefully your research has gone well for the Open Championship. We're going to try and maintain the momentum, build momentum for the last major of the year. It's good to see you this evening. There's a look at the forecast, extended look at the forecast, I should say. Again, it's just a little bit too far away to really signify a wave advantage yet, but we'll do that at the beginning of the show Wednesday, which by the time I'm live, it'll be about 4 hours or so, maybe even 3, until lock. So if you don't have any other plans Wednesday night, I encourage you to join me as I'll have all that last minute information for you. Yeah, I appreciate you putting that in chat, Darnell. I generally leave it up to the viewers if they feel so inclined to like the videos and to follow and such. And I say it at the end of every show. I'll say it now. I'm just grateful that you all take some time out of your lives to watch and to listen what I have to say. So there's a look at your forecast. We'll jump into Fantasy National. And before I get too far into it, I was talking to Stewie there about Sepp, and while he is correct that he's going, off of a solid performance last week at the Scottish Open, at least Fantasy National doesn't have any of the strokes gained data, so we don't know where a lot of those strokes came, whether it was approach or off the tee. If he gained 7 on the greens, that would be cause for concern. He's played really well this year, taking nothing away from him. The irons have been good lately. He's actually been pretty darn good off the tee. But as I was mentioning, Stewie, we've seen this before, especially around major season. Yes, I have been around lately, but at work, back on the DFS grind, no, hey, you got to do what you got to do. I am fortunate that I'm able to do this you know, I guess kind of as a living. So, you know, by all means, you know, don't feel obligated to take all that time out to watch and to listen to me. But I'm just very, very appreciative that you do, Darnell. Again, we've seen this from Sepp. You know, he had several top fives early in the season, or top tens maybe. And he comes to the Masters with a lot of steam. Everybody was excited, you know, having top five the Arnold Palmer, which is long and difficult generally. And I mean, he gained 6 on the greens. The irons were in form, and for whatever reason, he misses the cut. And I don't think he's done well at the Masters, but he did top 20 at the prior year. Comes to Augusta this year and misses the cut. A big letdown performance, and I can't remember that far back. Stewie, you're somewhat aware of all the family situation that I've had going on, but you know, I've forgotten a lot since then. I'm pretty sure I played a little bit of Sepp that week, probably a lot, and it didn't work out. And you know, it didn't work out for anybody who did play him. He comes back in the top 15s, the RBC Heritage, and wins the Truist. So, I mean, clearly he's still in great form. Leads up to the PGA, where he misses the cut. Now, he wasn't a disaster by any means. He only lost a half of a stroke at the PGA at Quail Hollow. Gained a couple on the greens. He's never been great around the green. So, I mean, that, you know, this is just basically Sepp Straka norms here. But for whatever reason, he just doesn't put it together enough to make the cut at the PGA. PGA is very difficult to, you know, you can forgive miscuts here and there. But I'm saying there's a pattern here, Stewie. Very good performances at tournaments that aren't necessarily all that difficult, with a couple of notable exceptions. Arnold Palmer's difficult. Memorial's always difficult. He top fives the Memorial, then misses the cut at the U.S. Open. So 0 for 3 in majors this year, and that's a pretty big factor. And again, I'll show you the research towards the end of the night. But there's a reason why I'm off of Sepp, considering his major performance. It's the bad taste left in your mouth. It's a tough one. I mean, yeah, there's no arguing that. I'll put it this way: come Wednesday night, Sepp will probably rate out pretty darn well, considering I'm going to have a pretty good amount in strokes gained approach. I'll probably have, you know, a decent amount in fairways. And other than the Scottish this past week, he'd been hitting fairways. So he'll probably rate out high. This is a gut feeling on my end. It simply is a gut feeling, combining his past major performance this season with some research that I'm alluding to, and his Open Championship. Gosh dang it, I always forget. I have to put the Open. Yeah, he finished runner-up 2 years ago, top 25 last year is solid, but it's, I don't know. To be fair to Sepp Straka, this is a pretty good Open record, so that doesn't necessarily apply. I'm just not there. I've been, like you said, I've been burned a couple times. Thoughts on Connors? I mentioned this last night as well. He made the cut last week at the Scottish Open, but I wasn't too terribly impressed, considering he's coming off of a wrist injury. I wanted to see how well he performed, and it stinks that we don't have the strokes gained data. But, you know, if he gained 2.5 or 4 or even 5.5 with the irons, then I would be a little bit more confident. But you see, all we have here is the final finishing position, where he was essentially field average. If we take a look at like fairways, mean, he hit some amount of fairways, but not as many as he normally does. I don't know. That one's tough because he's going to rate out extremely high for me. But I'm quite hesitant because of that wrist injury, which I think he withdrew from the U.S. Open because of it. It might have been the Travelers. But I was not terribly impressed with Connors, and I didn't play him at all last week, wanting to see how he did off of that wrist injury. So good questions. Keep them coming. I do enjoy the thought processes behind certain players. And again, like last week, I wasn't playing Victor Hovland. He finishes top 10. So I will, not happily, but I will admit when I'm wrong. And I might be wrong on Sepp and Connors this week, but just giving you my reasoning for why I'm not, at least on a Monday night, not eager to play them. Don't know. I think he gives it 100%. If he wasn't healthy, he wouldn't play. That's true, but we've seen injuries nag on players. I mean, I think despite the fact that he's number one in the world, I think you'd be hard-pressed to say that Scotty hasn't had a little bit of some, I don't want to say disappointment, but he hasn't had a Scotty-like dominant performance in a while, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was hurt at the beginning of this year. Spieth's another one with the wrist injury. His is quite further back, but yes. And he hasn't been necessarily right for a little while. His wrist injury was back, or did he re-aggravate it? I think he re-aggravated it around the Memorial or the U.S. Open. So if Spieth's going to gain 8.5 with the irons, that's saying something. Oh no, his was the Travelers. That's right. He withdrew from the Travelers, and that was Spieth with the neck. Yeah, I don't know. Anytime you're talking about injuries, I always have to hit the pause button because there are so many, especially in a major, there are so many players that you want to mix and match that I'm willing to, and again, this is just an example, like I'm willing to use a Justin Rose, a Matt Fitzpatrick, a Russell Henley, whereas I don't have to use a Jordan Spieth or take the chance that he's not fully healthy. Hopefully that makes sense. His withdrawal, this is his first tournament back. Yeah. Let's cover a couple things here real quick, and then we'll dig into some historical Open Championship data, what little there is. So based on that forecast that we had from Windfinder, let's look at some moderate and windy conditions. And there we go. Your top performers in moderate and windy conditions going back to the beginning of last year. Scotty, Rory, 6,100 Mav McNeely has been very good in moderate and windy conditions. So I was very high on Mav at the Scottish. He played okay, top 25. It was okay. So probably somebody I'm going to be anxious to use quite a bit again especially because of his price. Xander, Colin Morikawa, Sungjae, Hideki, Russell Henley, Sam Burns, and Corey Connors are your top 10 in terms of total performance in moderate and windy conditions. Now, I don't know. I take that back. I believe the windy filter is set at 17 miles an hour. I do not know what the cutoff is for moderate, so it's a little bit subjective on what you would think is moderate and windy. It seems like, based on the forecast that we saw in Windfinder, it would be moderate at the or at Portrush. which would be pretty calm, all things considered. Um, McNeely way too cheap on DK. At first thought, yes, but to Stewie's point, he's probably going to be pretty popular. It would be my guess, especially with Scotty at 14-2. Ryan, Connors are too cheap as well. Again, Connors has the injury. Rye, where's he? Rye's not even in the 7,000s. Huh. So I'm gonna be honest. I put in some win bets, some wagers today. I haven't done a whole lot of looking at the pricing, so I'll be I'll be a little shocked when I see some of these. I knew Scotty at 14. I knew mostly the top of the board, things like that. But Rye at 6,900 seems intriguing, is how I'll phrase that. Bet Rom at 12-1. It's hard for me to bet somebody at 12, Darnell, but I don't hate that because I do think Rom is in a good spot considering how well he has played this year. And this is something I said at the early part of the year. I do think this is a John Rahm revenge tour almost. Considering how poor he was last year, missing the cut at the PGA, didn't even play in the U.S. Open, had a very, very middling to poor Masters. Like, the fact that he's top 15 to every single major this year, I don't hate that bet. That's just a little too short of a price for me. Got struck at 1,000 in the beginning of the week. Sepp Straka at 1,000-1. Oof, that's pretty high. I don't hate that if it's 1,000. I don't know where you got that, but 100-1. Still, 100-1 is pretty solid on a player that has played as well as Sepp Straka. Like that's just good value in my opinion. Even though I'm not going to be playing him in DFS, that's just good value in my opinion, Stewie. I don't hate that wager at all. But wagers and DFS are two completely different things. So, all right, we looked at some wind. The one thing we didn't really do last night, and I want to make sure we cover it, even though that forecast is relatively benign, or at least what I would think would be benign for Northern Ireland at this time of year, this is still a major championship. It is still Portrush. I imagine it's still going to be pretty difficult. So, win rounds have been difficult relative to par. Your top performers in the field this week: Scotty, Rory, Corey Connors, Tom Hoagie, Keegan, Russell Henley, Seabass, Denny McCarthy, Bryson, and Colin Morikawa are your top 10 when rounds have been difficult relative to par. Picking my lineups, I always check the odds. Not totally true. It's different ways to go about it. I generally try not to look at odds, although projected ownerships, a lot of the forecasting for projected ownerships is based on odds and implied odds and how much the lines have moved, back and forth. So there is merit there, Darnell. It's not something I apply in my process. So, all right, we've done a couple of overview type things. Ownership in golf is overrated. See, the more I have played and the more I have started like really tracking and keeping results, it kind of I hate to use again another cop-out answer, but kind of depends on the tournament. When you have like a big thing like a major, ownership isn't all that big of a deal. Now, when you're into some of these lesser tournaments where a lot of the ownership is coalesced, then I would disagree with you. But at least for this week in a major, I don't think you have to get too terribly unique or different to to get your uniqueness in lineup building. So, all right, let's go to Microsoft Excel just really quickly, and I'll bring up the course factors here for previous Open Championships. Now, we don't have a whole lot of data here. In fact, these two metrics here are from Portrush, but as I mentioned last night, I am quite skeptical of this data because we didn't get around the green or putting data that year. All we got was off the tee and approach. Even in that year, we didn't get fairways, we didn't get good drives, anything to that effect. So essentially, I'm going to ignore this. So we'll have to make some inferences here. It is an Open Championship. We are definitely not going to ignore the approach, but I do feel like off the tee isn't as valuable as I thought it was going to be at the Scottish. A lot of off the tee comes in distance, and while distance can help, you see last year was actually a negative factor. Didn't play a factor at all. It was more so about hitting the greens, finding fairways, things of that nature. Portrush, distance can help because there's a couple of dog legs that the longest of long hitters can cut and potentially drive a green or two on these, shorter par fours. I'm thinking I think it's the fourth or the fifth hole. That's a big dog leg, measures 380 something on the scorecard, but is essentially a 90-degree turn. The biggest hitters can cut that dog leg and drive the green. So while length can help, I think I'm more so focused on fairways and greens this week. So a lot more an iron play. Good drives gained, greens, things of that nature. Of course, we're going to look at some putting, but it's going to be that Velcro filter. And there's just not a lot of slow greens on the normal PGA Tour. It is a major. We're probably going to look at a little bit of around the green as well. Talked about the distance and the greens and whatnot. In terms of scoring, it's a major. It's going to be about your bogey avoidance for the most part. You see last year was heavily about your bogey avoidance. Now, Portrush in 2019, good thing I checked. It's this one. In fact, let me highlight this row just so I know moving forward. Now, Portrush in 2019, again, was about bogey avoidance, but we had such harsh, terrible conditions that I do think we might look at some birdies gained this week. It might be something what I normally do, like 10% in bogey avoidance. We might actually look at like 5% birdies gained when it's difficult, because even as challenging and harsh weather that we had in 2019, Lowry still got to 15 under to win that week. So birdies are to be had around Portrush. Heard it's going to be a 10 on the stimp. Yeah, that's a number that I've seen as well, which is astronomically slow for PGA Tour standards. For schmucks like me, that's probably decent speed, but for these professionals, that's awfully slow. But yeah, I think it's going to be worthwhile. I don't think we're going to be looking at too many eagles. I think we're going to be just focused on birdies gained and bogey avoidance when it's difficult. And now to the meat and the potatoes of what this data dive essentially shows. How much do par 3s, 4s, and 5s generally give, or what's their importance at most Open Championships? I'm not too terribly concerned with the individual links because every course is different. But we see, like in 2019, Portrush, the par 3s were much more than the par 5s. I can't say much more. They were more than the par 5s. And I would tend to agree, even though there's 3 par 5s here, they didn't really play that much under par. In fact, your winner, Shane Lowry, was slightly above field average on par fives. It's really in the par fours. Scotty struggles on these slow putting surfaces, fade. I mean, he still he still played well at the Scottish, and those are similar type surfaces. So I don't know if I can full fade it now. If we're talking 50-60% ownership, then we're going to start talking about that, because that's astronomically high. But where I'm sitting on a Friday night, it's hard for me to justify fading Scotty, Darnell, especially considering we have a 5K region. If we didn't have a 5K region, then yeah, I could absolutely see Scotty, a fade of Scotty. But, Aaron Rai at 69, Matt McNeely at 61, those are just two names that we've talked about tonight. Those two players alone are going to let you comfortably play Scotty in lineups. I don't know if I'm playing 5K. I don't know who or what is down there. But just like we talked about in the Scottish Open last week, you're going to have to play some DP World Tour guys. These, relatively unknown guys. The figure I heard last week was like 40% of the cut made generally at Scottish Opens are DP World Tour guys. So you're going to have to play some of them, and most of them are at the bottom of the price board. That's about it worth playing. Maybe, like I said, I'm not terribly familiar with the price board. I'm just being honest. But I don't think an outright full fade of Scotty early on a Monday without seeing projected ownerships, at least for me, I don't think I'm doing that. Hey, good evening, P. Thanks for jumping in chat. Very much appreciated. It's good to see you. Hopefully you've had a good week. Hopefully you had a good Scottish Open and ISCO Championship, and you're ready for the final major of the year for the Open Championship. Playing Rory and Rahm up top, I don't hate that. I really don't. Last week I played Scotty and Rory. I just didn't play Xander. So, I haven't decided what I'm doing yet. And I take a lot more into ownerships than you do. So, but the thing is with Rahm and Rory in the 10Ks, in the 5 digits, you might not need them to win at their price, but you still need them to top 5 or top 10. Now, that's a lot easier than winning, sure, but Scotty's the number 1 player in the world for a reason. Would also love a breakdown on what you think about Bryson. Xander's getting steamed up by the community. I'm all set. We'll get into that. I'm not the biggest fan of Bryson at Open Championship venues. I don't think the game suits him. That style of game suits him. He's much more, fast greens. I can't say bomb and gouge. That's not fair to Bryson, because he's very good. He has very good touch and all that stuff. But he is an American. He is the definition of an American golfer. Hit it high, hit it far. And Open Championships generally don't suit him well. That's my first thought, Stewie, on Bryson. But coming back to the detailed data around the Open Championships, we're looking at a lot of par fours, and it's mainly in these two links, like we talked about a little bit last night, 400 to 450 and 450 to 5. He's a freaking scientist, knows how to play the math and the angles. That's why I love him. Oh, yeah, that's fair, but his Open Championship record isn't great. I think he has one good finish, and the rest has been pretty poor. Granted, he never played the Masters very well, and in the past 2 years, I think he's top 10. So maybe he's figured something out with that. We'll see. And of course, we don't have any proximity or putting data, so all that is blank. Open for interpretation on what you think. What proximity length is going to matter here the most. I'm not entirely sold that I know which one it's going to be. We have a lot of shorter par fours, which would make me think that it would be like the 125 to maybe 175 range. But that is also assumes that players are hitting driver, and players aren't going to hit driver on every hole. They might lay up with some irons, which would make more, 150, 175, and 175 to 200 proximity. So, interested to hear what your all's thoughts are on proximity. And these greens are small, so I don't know if total prox is the way I want to go either. Like if these were large greens, like think St. Andrews, then I might think a little bit different on that. But with these being such small greens, I don't know how to think about proximity. So be interested to hear from you all on that. But anyway, it's much less data than we normally have. Masters, we've started to get all of this data. U.S. Open, PGA, we get the strokes gain data. It's a little bit less than what we're accustomed to, but in historical Open Championships, it's been mostly about really hitting greens. Good drives being you hit the fairway or you hit the green in regulation from the rough, hitting greens, bogey avoidance, and a lot in these par fours. This number, I can't begin to tell you how astronomically high a 5.5 is compared to the rest of the PGA Tour. It's really high. So we're going to have a lot in par fours. All right, so with that, now that we've covered what data we can regarding Open Championships, let's go back to Fantasy National, figure out some of these players that we think, or at least have played or have done well in these various metrics. We will do a little bit off the tee. I don't know how much, if any, I'm going to focus on off the tee, but I think it's prudent to do so. Have a good night, fellas. Have an early morning. Let's win big. Darnell, thanks again for jumping in chat. Very, very much appreciated. Hope to see you Wednesday night. Kind of 3 hours before lineups lock for the Open Championship. Best of luck this week if I don't see you. But yeah, very much appreciated for you jumping in the chat. There is a show tomorrow. That show tomorrow, is for the Barracuda, the alternate field event. So I'll be live tomorrow for the Barracuda. But if you have no interest in that, then it's a night that you can skip. But I will be live tomorrow for the Barracuda. Playing proximity on the par threes, 175 to 200. That's actually not too bad. Not too bad of a thought there. We got 168 here, but the rest 193, 201, 232. I don't hate that. I don't hate that thought process there, Stewie. That could work. Especially since I was talking how some players are going to decide to lay up and make sure they're in the fairway. They very well could leave themselves with more 175 to 200 or even 200 plus approach shots. And there are a couple of longer par fours here too. 491, 470. Plays to more than a third of a shot over par. 469. Those could mandate long iron approaches, especially if the wind picks up. So, you might be onto something with that, Stewie. All right, we'll start digging into some of the players that have excelled in the stats that we looked at, or in the metrics that we looked at in Microsoft Excel. Just doing a little bit of off the tee here. Your top performers off the tee when rounds have been difficult. Going back to last year, Rory, Xander, Jordan Spieth, Scotty, Bryson, Colin Morikawa, Ben On, Kevin Yu, Sungjae, and Victor Hovland. Just to finish out the thought process on Bryson there, Stewie, his performance in the Opens, other than his very good performance, I believe this was St. Andrews, and that played, much easier than normal Open Championships. Other than St. Andrews, his Open Championship record has been pretty disappointing. Just being all things equal, been pretty disappointing. Missed the cut last year. I do believe he was on the wrong half of the draw last year, which players like Rory and Tommy missed the cut because they got caught in that swale that ended up making a huge wave advantage. But even so, like 60th, 33rd is fine. Even in Portrush in 2019, he missed the cut, didn't hit his irons very well. Completely different player now than he was then, sure, but his previous Open Championships leave quite a bit to be desired, and that's why I'm just kind of hesitant on Bryson. Whereas at the Masters, he never played the Masters well until 2 years ago, until last year, and he backed it up this year. So maybe he figured something out with the Masters or at Augusta, but it'd be a little bit different if his 8th at the Open Championship was last year. It wasn't. It was at the old course. So that's what gives me pause on Bryson. Different player these days. He's not the bottom gouge guy like he used to be. I would still say he's the definition of American golfing. Hit it high, hit it far, get it as close to the hole as you can, and then try to make some putts. Different player than he was then. The last couple of years, the change came, sure, but you think Open Championships, you think of low ball flights, or these penetrating ball flights like Rory, like Lowry, who can play the ground game so well, like Adam Scott, Jason Day. Why do Australians generally play well in Open Championships? Because they're used to that ground game, using the contours and all of that to their advantage. Bryson doesn't necessarily do that. He can factor in like slopes and stuff on greens and approach shots, but I'm talking like actually utilizing the knobs and the valleys and such in your approaches. Bryson isn't really known for that. I'm not saying he doesn't, but I'm just not. That's, I guess, the second player that you and I will be different on this week, and we'll have to see what the forecast is like too, because if it's really windy, I don't know if I like Bryson as much as if it were more calm. Would be my initial thought there. Anyway, there's your top off the tee performers. When rounds have been difficult, we'll reset this. Your top iron players, and I am going to go, last 36, so long as it's been this year. So understand, like players like Bryson and John Rahm, Terrell Hatton, these guys are going to have much fewer rounds since they're on live. But your top iron players in the past 36 rounds: Scotty, Victor, Shane Lowry, Sepp Straka, Colin, Akshay Bhatia, Daniel Berger, Hideki, Patrick Cantlay, and Bud Cauley. So it's interesting to see that several of these players we didn't see at the Scottish Open. Cantlay was not there last week. Bhatia was not there last week. So quite interesting. And then players like Colin, really disappointed, missing the cut. Hideki, I don't think played last week. So several of these players didn't play last week at the Scottish Open, but is still at, or at least have been in the best recent form with their irons. Like Terrell Hatton this week, along with Harris English. Now that's where we agree. I like Terrell Hatton a lot this week. A lot. In fact, he might be one of the two players that I bet this week, or made a wager on this week so far. Really like Terrell Hatton. So, your top around the green players in the last 36: Sung Jae, Keegan, Matt Wallace, Mateo Montecero, Russell Henley, Tommy Fleetwood, Hideki, Jason Day, Scotty Scheffler, and Tom Kim are your top 10 in around the green. And then I will expand the time frame here. I need to get all rounds because we'll look at putting, but we're going to look at putting on slow greens, and there's just very little data on slow greens on the PGA Tour. It's just not normal for the PGA Tour. Really, the only course domestically is Pebble Beach. Sorry, I need to include Velcro. There it is. Velcro speed greens, slow greens. The only domestic course, really, you do have a little bit of Pebble Beach. You have Plantation Course. But that's about it. Most of these are, international events, particularly Caribbean, which is most common on the PGA Tour. Vedanta, Port Royal, El Cardinal, El Camaleon when it was a part of the regular rotation, Corrales, these Caribbean events. Those are the ones that really have the slow greens on the PGA Tour. Your top putters on slow greens in the field this week at the Open Championship: Denny McCarthy, Sung Jae, Taylor Pendrith, Cam Smith, John Rahm, Akshay Bhatia, Adam Scott, Nico Echeverria, Justin Rose, and Sahith Theegala. I know he left the chat, but just to check his thought process on Scotty, hopefully he'll watch the show either tomorrow or something. Scotty's actually been pretty darn good on slow greens. Top 20 in this field. So Darnell mentioned how he was going to fade Scotty. He wasn't playing him on slow greens. I believe it was Darnell that mentioned that. Scotty struggles on these slow putting surfaces. Well, based on the players in this field, he's actually top 20. So there you go, for what it's worth. Okay, we'll move to driving, distance, greens, fairways. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to do much with distance. Yeah, it can help, but most of the time, we're just kind of looking at fairways, good drives, and greens. If we're doing all that, I'm just going to look at good drives gained. Good drive being the players hit the fairway or they hit the green in regulation from the rough. So they're either not missing the fairway by that much, they're playing out of that intermediate rough, or their irons are so good they can be in the tall fescue and still hit the green. Your top good drives gained players in the past 36 rounds have been Corey Connors, Aaron Rai, Daniel Berger, Sepp Straka, Colin Morikawa, Russell Henley, Shane Lowry, Scotty, Patrick Cantlay, and Harris English. So, again, another good shout there, Stewie, on Harris English, somebody that was pretty high on last week. He did okay at the Scottish Open, top 25. So, I mean, it was good. It was fine. But I do like that shout there because he's generally somebody that keeps it in front of him, doesn't get too wayward off the tee, fairly solid, good putter. I do like that. Talk about how scary the bunkers are going to be this week. Just like any Open Championship venue, you're going to have pot bunkers and things of that nature littered throughout the course. But unlike most Open Championship venues, and I did this a little bit last night, but we'll do it again just very quickly. There are actually not that many bunkers around Portrush. Only 57 of them. Sorry, let me zoom out. Only 57 of them. Now, they seem to be rather large. 80,000 square feet of bunkers with only 57 of them. But on the PGA Tour, it's actually some of the... It's a course with some of the fewest bunkers around. So, while the bunkers are going to... Like, a player's going to have to avoid the bunkers, particularly the pot bunkers, I'm not terribly concerned about it because there's so few of them. Here, there's no path to the greens from them. That's probably true. So, while we're on this page view, I'm going to be focused on good drives. You could look at scrambling if a player does find themselves in these bunkers. They'll be scrambling, but scrambling was much higher here than the average tour event in 2019, so that's what gives me a little bit of pause. But since you bring it up, your top scramblers in the field this week: Matteo Monacero, Mackenzie Hughes, Hideki, Scotty, Tommy Fleetwood, Matt Wallace, Tom Hoagie, Rory, Denny McCarthy, and Russell Henley are your top 10 scramblers. And putting is a part of scrambling. So these guys like Denny are probably just making a lot of putts, would be my guess. Or like Hideki, their short game is so very good that they can get up and down from a lot of places you wouldn't expect. But you're right. Open Championship venues generally have some daunting bunkers. But considering this is one of the venues that has the least bunkers, don't think I'm going to factor that too much into my calculations, Stewie. Whereas last week at the Renaissance Club, that's why I put a lot of focus on distance, because the biggest hitters were just going to carry the bunkers that were throughout the Renaissance Club, like the fairway pop bunkers. This is me just being transparent and honest with the viewer. I'm not all that familiar with Portrush, that I don't know if distance will carry most of those bunkers or not. I just don't know. Trying to remark about how fairways gained is something that's going to be a big thing this week. You got to hit the fairway. Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Generally, if I'm looking at fairways, I generally tend to lean towards this good drives gained metric. But yes, if you want to take a look at your top fairways gained players, past 36, Aaron Rai, Takumi Kanaya, Corey Connors, Colin Morikawa, Zach Johnson, Sung Jae, Daniel Berger, JT Poston, Sepp Straka, and Lucas Glover. The reason I like good drives is because it's also factoring in the greens in regulation. While it's not a direct, one-to-one comparison, for the most part, your players that are good in good drives are also hitting a decent amount of fairways. For the most part, you'll get some exceptions like Patrick Cantlay, because his irons have been so good lately. Harris English has been a little bit middling in fairways. Harry Hall's been a little bit more middling in fairways. But for the most part, your players that are good in good drives are also hitting plenty of fairways. Yep, Sepp's up there. Like I said, Sepp's probably going to rate out very, very well for me this week. Again, you and I went through it at the beginning of the show why I'm not on Sepp for his major tournament performance this year. Which, speaking of, I want to make sure I get to that, show you that part of the research. So I'm going to get hustling a little bit. Again, feel free to ask any questions. If I don't get to them all, I apologize, but I do want to make sure I hit everything that I want to talk about. That was fairways and greens. We're definitely going to need to look at some scoring. And just to speed up time, I am going to use this difficult relative to par filter. But we're going to look at both birdies gained and bogeys avoided. I can't talk. So let me bring in all of the data. So when rounds have been difficult relative to par, going back to the beginning of last year, your top bogey avoiders have been Scotty, Rory, Xander, Jon Rahm, Ludwig, Denny McCarthy, Colin Morikawa, Corey Connors, Sepp Straka, and Russell Henley. That's where the majority of the weight in this page view is going to go. However, there are still birdies to be had. You had 5 or 6 holes that played under par, even in the harshest conditions from 2019. So your top birdies gained players when rounds have been difficult. Scotty, Bryson, Sam Burns, Rory, Bud Colley, Corey Connors, Victor Hovland, Ludwig, Taylor Pendrith, and Matty Schmid are your top 10 in birdies gained. You mentioned 175 to 200 proximity. I'm not 1,000% sold, so I'm actually going to skip proximity. I'm going to skip par threes. We're going to go straight into the par fours. All par fours are going to matter, but it's mostly in these two right here, the 400 to 450 and 450 to 500. So I'm going to just filter for 2025 as soon as Fantasy National catches up. I'll sort on all par fours, but we're looking at these two ranges here. So again, somebody like Scotty, second and first. Justin Thomas, 11th and 8th. Excellent at these two ranges. Keegan stands out. Aaron Rye, Michael Kim, 8th and 10th. Nick Taylor, Shane Lowry, great in both of these ranges. Hideki probably deserves an honorable mention. Harris English probably deserves an honorable mention. Denny McCarthy. These players that excel at both of these two ranges. For the reasons why we went through Microsoft Excel, these are the two most important ranges historically at Open Championships and especially at Portrush. Okay, getting a little close on time. Again, feel free to ask any questions, but I'm going to go to Microsoft Excel, and I was not able to post this to social media earlier today, but I'll do that either later tonight or tomorrow. But what I'm going to post is the patterns of winners at the Open Championship going back to 2012, going back all the way to Ernie Els. This is what I call the winner matrix. Let's see how Open champions fared at previous Open Championships. So Xander always played pretty darn well. Had a runner-up, but several top 20s before his win last year. Brian Harman seemingly winning out of nowhere. He also had played 2 Open Championships very well before winning. Cam Smith even had a top 20 before winning at St. Andrews. The complete outlier here is Colin Morikawa. Never played an Open Championship and then wins in 2021. He is the outlier. But what I want you to notice, every single champion had at least one top 20 within 5 years of their win. Every single one of them had at least one, if not multiple, top 20s within 5 years of winning their Open Championship. Again, the outlier here is Colin. So, especially for your outright wagers, make sure the person you're wagering has a top 20 within 5 years at an Open Championship. That's the first thing that I noticed in my research. The second thing that I noticed, these tournaments that are highlighted in green are the majors. Let's take a look at their major performance. Xander, last year, winner at the PGA, but top 10, technically all 3 of them. He just happened to win one as well, but major performance, excellent. Brian Harman is the outlier. Missed the cut at the Masters, missed the cut at the PGA, but at least made the cut at the U.S. Open. But he's the outlier. Cam Smith, before leaving for LIV, missed the cut at the U.S. Open, 3rd at the Masters, top 15 at the PGA, played the majors extremely well. Colin, top 5, top 10, top 20, played the Masters extremely well. Lowry had a top 10. Francesco Molinari had a top 20 and a top 25. Every single one of these champions, every single one, with the exception of Brian Harman, had at least one top 20 At least one. Most had 2 top 20s in that season's majors. So that's the second bit of criteria that I would strongly advise you to consider. Look at their major performance this season. Another thing that I want to highlight, these these Open champions were in extremely good recent form. Xander, nothing outside of top 15, just playing excellent. Brian Harman even, top 15 the Scottish, top 10 runner-up. Excellent form. Top 10 from Cam Smith in 2022 and a couple more top 15s. Littering top 10s with Colin Morikawa. Top 10s. Win in the second, and another top 15. The outlier here is Stenson in 2016. Henrik Stenson wins the Open in 2016, but had only played a couple of times in the past couple of months and missed the cut at both of them. He's the outlier. The third piece of criteria in your win wagers, make sure they are in fantastic recent form. I'm talking multiple top 15s, if not top 10s. And I went back 2 months, or essentially to the beginning of May. If you want to go back to the Masters, since that incorporates all of the majors, I wouldn't blame you for that. I just went to May, the beginning of May. But in the past couple of months, they've had multiple top 10s. Multiple top 10s, most of them. So that's the third piece of criteria. And the last piece of criteria that I noticed, again, we didn't get the information or the data from the Scottish Open, but their most recent event, look at them. They all gained on approach. Again, we didn't get the Scottish, but I'm hard-pressed to believe somebody finishing 12th and 10th at the Scottish Open didn't at least perform field average in approach. Same can be said for good drives gained. They were all positive in good drives gained. So those are the 4 kind of criteria that really stood out to me. I'll probably only be able to post 3, or at least I'll mention the 4th one being the approach. But since we didn't get the Scottish Open strokes gained data, it's going to be hard for me to narrow down the field anymore. But what I will tell you is that there are about 18 players that fit those 3 criteria. You know, top 20 within 5 years at an Open, had, you know, at least a top 15 or a top 20 at a major this season, and had a couple of top 10s or top 15s recently. There's about 18 players that I'll be posting over to social media. So be on the lookout for that. I'll try to get that posted as soon as possible. It might be tomorrow. I was waiting all day for Fantasy National to update, and it just, the update or the Scottish Open got put in a little bit too late for me before I started prepping for my show tonight. But that's what I have for you in terms of a data dive. I need to thank Darnell and Stewie and P for jumping into chat. Very, very much appreciated. I really appreciated all the questions. Very good questions. I appreciate all the questions, even if we're different. Hopefully I at least provided you my reasoning for it. You may disagree with it, but that's the beauty of what we're doing here, is that we can look at a player and see 2 different stories. So a reminder that I will be live tomorrow night for the alternate field event in Truckee, California for the Barracuda. It's a very unique tournament. It is a modified Stableford tournament. So I will be live tomorrow for the Barracuda, and then I'll be live Wednesday night for the Open Championship DFS Tactics show. So thanks to you 3 for jumping in chat. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. I love what I do, taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. I've had 3 pretty good weeks in a row. We're going to try to make it 4 in a row for the last major of the season, the Open Championship. So thanks again for all the support, for all of the wagers you made so far this week for the Open Championship, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Open Championship. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Barracuda full show, may all your bets be profitable.